Hi Year 9, welcome to your first lesson back after half term. So the way it's going to work for you guys, as you've picked GCSE Geography as one of your options, over the next 5 weeks we're going to be doing a case study on 5 different countries that come up again and again as part of case studies and other examples that you're going to need throughout the Geography GCSE. So we thought it'd be really good for you guys to get a base knowledge of these different places that you can then apply to various different scenarios as we move through the GCSE. What you're going to need for this lesson is your fact book, a pen to write with, and just a bit of scrap paper that you can jot some ideas down that you might not necessarily want to go in the fact book as we go along. So to start off with, and this is what we're going to start each lesson off with, is a quick fire round. Normally we'd be looking at the knowledge that you gained from the previous lesson. However, we've not done one before. So instead, it's a bit of a quick fire round about general knowledge and information about the UK that hopefully you've learned about previously at Key Stage 3, so in Year 7 up to now. So what I want you to do is pause the video. So where you see that pause symbol at the bottom of a slide, we'd encourage you to pause the video, have a go at the tasks, and then once you've done that, continue and press play, and we'll continue with the lesson. So have a read through of these 5 questions and have a go at answering them on your scrap bit of paper. Off you go. So to start off with, we're going to look at the location of the UK. Hopefully you've got a general idea of where the UK is. If you were to look at a map or a globe, you'd be able to point it out. But a really good way of writing answers when you're given a question such as describe a particular place is to use this clock idea. And each of these stand for a different aspect that you might try and use in your answer when describing a particular location. So try and include compass points, so northeast, southwest, latitude, things like the equator or the Tropic of Cancer, Capricorn, things like that, those invisible lines that go around the globe. Oceans or seas that are nearby that you could include, countries that are nearby, and the continent that the place is. So having a look at the map on the right hand of your screen and thinking about this clock idea, I'd like you to write a description of the location of the UK into the box on your fact sheet where it says location. Off you go. Hopefully you've had a go at that. I'm just going to highlight a few things that hopefully you have included as well, but if not, you can go back and alter to add this extra bit in. So we've got a couple of oceans and seas that you could have included, the Atlantic and the North Sea. You could have tried to include compass points, so saying that the North Sea is to the east of the UK would make it sound even better. We've also got several countries nearby that you could have included, so Iceland, Ireland, France, or any other places in Europe you could have used, and again trying to use compass points to describe them. So for example, Ireland is to the west of the UK. And hopefully it didn't say it on this particular map, but you know that the UK is in Europe. So we definitely need to make sure that we're including that in our answer as well. So go back and add any of those things in if you have missed them. Next up, we're going to look at some key facts. Now, hopefully you remember earlier on in Year 9 where we did about development, and we looked at all of these different things as part of that particular topic. And all of these give us a bit of information around how developed a particular country is. So we've got things like population, life expectancy, birth and death rates, how big a place is, the GNI per capita. So this is how much money a particular country has. So the way it's worked out is they look at all the money that a particular country has and then divide it by the population to make it a bit more fairer and a bit more comparable to other places. Then you've got this HDI, this Human Development Index, which combines lots and lots of different things to try and give an overview of how developed a place is. So it looks at things such as life expectancy, how much education a particular child gets, so how many years they'd spend at school, and again an economic indicator such as the GNI per capita. And this then gives us a rank of how developed a particular place is. Now, I'm not going to tell you all of these for the UK. What I would like you to do is do a bit of independent research. So in your fact book, there are a few different websites listed on there. And what I want you to try and do is find out the answer to each of these different indicators somewhere online and write those into the box that it says. Make sure that you're using reliable sources and try and get it as up to date as possible. So you might not be able to get 2020 data, but try and get at least 2019 or 2018 to make sure that it's really, really accurate. Next up, we're going to look at climate. Now, remember that climate is different to weather. You'll have learnt about this in year 8. So a climate is the average weather for over 30 or so years, whereas the weather is what's happening right now. So if you look outside your window, is it raining? Is it sunny? That's the weather, whereas the climate is sort of the average for that particular place at that particular time. So we would say that the UK has a temperate climate, and that's a really good key word if you've not come across that before. And what that means is that we have cool, wet winters and warm, wet summers. And we use climate graphs to help us understand the different climates of a place. So to the left-hand side of your screen, you can see a climate graph for London. And this is quite typical for a lot of places in the UK. It might vary slightly, but this is a general pattern that we would see. So just to refresh your memory, if you've forgotten how to read climate graphs, is you've got the months going along the bottom, then you've got the precipitation along one side, or it's called rainfall here, and then you've got the temperature on the other side. And the way to read it is that the bars, so the green bars on this one, show us the precipitation or the rainfall, and the reddy purpley line is telling us the temperature. So if you were to look at the rainfall in January, you'd look at the axis on the left hand side, and so you'd say it was around 55 millimetres of rainfall on average in January, whereas if you looked at the temperature, you'd be looking at the line and then looking to the right hand side, the right axis, and so that would say that the temperature is round about 4 degrees on average. So what I would like you to do is, using that bit of information, can you complete the climate section in your fact book and try and challenge yourself and include some of the data from the climate graph. Don't use January because we've just gone through those answers, but try and pick out maybe some other months to pull out that information to include in your description. Okay, next up we've got ecosystems. And an ecosystem is a mixture of living and non-living things that work together to sustain life and make sure everything's working as it should. So the UK has quite a few different ecosystems, which you can see to the right-hand side are shown through different colours. So moorlands, for example, are shown in that orangey colour. So in England, you'd find mainly what we call deciduous trees, things like oak and ash, where elsewhere in the UK, such as Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, you get mainly coniferous trees such as firs and pines. So you might have noticed this if you visited different places. The UK, because it's an island, also has marine ecosystems in the oceans and seas off the mainland. And these are home to rare habitats and species that need to be protected, such as the bottlenose dolphin. So we've got various systems and ideas in place to make sure that they're protected. So what I would like you to do now is, using the information that I've spoken about and the information to the right hand side on the map of the UK, can you add in some information about ecosystems to your fact sheet? And you might want to do a bit of a spotlight on one in particular and do a little bit of extra research. So you might pick a deciduous forest, or you might pick a marine ecosystem, and trying to look at things like the food web and food chain to gain a bit more information about that particular one. Off you go. Next up, we're going to look at industry and MNCs. So if we begin by looking at industry, you have 4 main sectors that's recognised within geography, really. And they sort of have developed over time, and as sort of technology has advanced, we've sort of moved through them a little bit more. So the more developed countries will be further along in terms of the sectors that most people work in. So your primary sector are things such as mining and farming. Your secondary sector is turning these raw materials that you get from the primary sector into actual usable things. So secondary sector includes things like manufacturing and food processing. Next up, we get tertiary sector, and this is anything to do with selling services or goods. So loads and loads of things come under this, like nurses, doctors, teachers, salesmen, waitresses and waiters, people that work in retail. So the majority of people in the UK would come under this tertiary sector. And then more recently, we've developed what we've called a quaternary sector, and this is linked to the development of technology. So anyone that works in things such as computing, ICT, scientific research, all of this is linked to this quaternary sector. So whilst most people in the UK work in tertiary or quaternary, we do still have people that have farms, and we have farming here in the UK. So what I'd like you to do, using some of the websites as a guide, is try and find out what percentage of each of these sectors we have here in the UK. Off you go. Okay, next up are what we call MNCs, and this stands for multinational corporations. And these are companies that operate in several countries across the world. So there's quite a few examples that are from the UK, such as Rolls-Royce, HSBC, BP, Tesco, BT, Virgin Atlantic, JCB and Vodafone. So you can see there's a really broad range, from finance and banking to supermarkets to communications to travel. All of these are really big companies that are based or set up in the UK, but actually you'll find offices or premises linked to them across the world. So in your booklet, it asks you to list some MNCs that are from the UK. So you can use some of these as an example, but then it asks you to find other international ones that also have bases, so offices or factories, things like that, here in the UK. So you can use some of mine as an example, or you can do your own research to find out some more, but you'll need to do that to find out the ones that are based, that have premises here in the UK but aren't necessarily UK companies. So have a go, do a little bit of research, find out about all these different companies. Next up, we're going to look at trade. So the UK has quite a good trade links with various places across the world. Currently, we do a lot of trade with the EU. However, because of Brexit, this could all change. And obviously, because of coronavirus, this has sort of stilted the processes of negotiating those trade deals. So that'll be interesting to see how that develops. But other than that, you can see with the pie charts on the left where we import and export from. So exports are things that leave the UK, so things that we sell to other places, and imports are things that come into the UK, so things that we buy from elsewhere. And you can see they're fairly similar for both imports and exports. So some of the UK's biggest exports are things like machinery and transport equipment, whereas some of the biggest imports are things such as cars, oil and medicines. If you think about big car companies such as Audi, then they're a German company made in Germany. So we'd have to import those for people to be able to drive those types of cars. So you can use some as my examples, but also do a little bit of research around what other things do we import and export from the UK. Off you go. Okay, our penultimate category is global cities. Now, you might not have done too much about this because we do look at it in more detail at GCSE, but it's really good to get your knowledge there of what a global city is, have some examples, and to do a little bit of research so you know some of these specifics when we do come onto it in class. So a global city are arguably the most important cities in the world in terms of economics, so money, and cultural impacts. So they're not necessarily the capital city of a particular country or the largest city, the highest population, anything like that. They're just a city that's got a really important role in economic links with other countries, typically. So does the UK have any global cities? The answer is yes. Our main global city is London, unsurprisingly. This happens to be our capital, but it's not always. And things that we are particularly interested in and look at when we're looking at global cities are these kind of categories. So London, for example, has loads of well-respected universities that attract international students and international academics to come and work there. So how is that impacting? How does that make it a global city? Transport as well. It's got really good airports and multiple airports that all connect London, as well as rail routes. You've got the Eurostar that links London with places like Paris and Brussels. Why does that impact and make it a global city? So I want you to have a look at some of these different categories and make a few notes around how London is a global city, maybe concentrating on 2 or 3 of those ideas that I've written down there. Off you go. Okay, and finally we come on to the interesting facts section of your fact sheet. Now, this is kind of up to you what you want to fill it with. Obviously, it needs to be linked to geography in some way. I did a little bit of research to try and find out some interesting facts to include here. So you can definitely just Google and try and find some things to enhance your case study. So I found out things such as London was the first city in the world to trial an underground railway, which is now known as the London Underground. The UK has 69 official cities. You might want to find out about some of these. What makes a city a city? Why is it that London's a city, but also Lichfield's a city? Do some research around that. A place called Stonehenge is older than the pyramids. If you've not heard of Stonehenge or don't know what it is, you could maybe look into that and some other sort of historical places. Why were they built? Why do they exist? What's their sort of heritage and their link? And finally, the first OS map was a 1-inch map of Kent, which is a county towards the south of the UK, and it was published in 1801. So this idea for OS maps happened over 200 years ago, and now they've gone digital. We can get them online, and you can find anywhere in terms of location where it is and what you might find there. So you can use some of those as a bit of a base idea, but I want you to go and do some research because it will be things that you're interested in, that you want to think about, and hopefully it'll help you remember some of this information around the UK to help you build your case study. Okay, finally, we're just going to recap what you need to do now ahead of the next lesson. So please make sure that each section of your fact sheets are complete. Feel free to go back, pause, have a look at the slides again if you've missed anything, and make sure that you're doing extra research to fill in any gaps that you've got of the UK one. Then try and read through and learn as much information as you can about the UK. Some of you might already know some of the information, such as its location, so you can concentrate on things that you're less familiar with, maybe around the trade, for example. So try and remember a few key facts about all of those different sections that you've covered now and sort of go back and check on it, because as we mentioned, it's going to come up again and again and again, the UK, throughout your geography GCSE. And then finally, we're going to begin the next lesson checking back and what you can remember, what you've learned about this information about the UK. So we will be checking up, so make sure that you use the time to look back over it, maybe get someone at home if you can to sort of test you and quiz you on it, and really get that knowledge ingrained. All right, see you next time. Bye.